November 25th, 1863, Orchard Knob, Tennessee. The air is cold and thin and smells of wood smoke, river mud, and 6 weeks of accumulated gunpowder that has soaked itself into the soil of this valley and refused to leave. The Tennessee River bends like a gray scar through the dead November hills. The trees are stripped bare, the fields are trampled to soup, and to the east, rising out of the valley floor like the spine of a buried colossus, is Missionary Ridge. 500 feet of near-vertical limestone, frost-bitten scrub pine, and Confederate artillery. Looking at it from the valley floor is like staring up at the side of a cliff that somebody decided to arm. It doesn't look like a military position, it looks like a geological insult. And somewhere up there, behind log and dirt breastworks stacked along the very crest, 40,000 Confederate soldiers under General Braxton Bragg are looking down at the valley below with the quiet satisfaction of men who have God, gravity, and physics standing beside them. At the base of that ridge, 23,000 Union soldiers are waiting. They are the Army of the Cumberland. They are the men who got torn to pieces 2 months ago at Chickamauga Creek, the bloodiest 2 days in the entire Western Theater. They lost 16,000 men in 48 hours. They retreated into Chattanooga in a broken mob, and then the Confederates climbed the surrounding ridges and cut their supply line and watched them starve. For 6 weeks, these soldiers have been living on quarter rations. The horses are eating fence posts. The mules are dying in the streets from starvation. The men are hollow-eyed, thin-faced, and burning with a shame they cannot put into words because the word is Chickamauga, and that word sits in the chest like a bayonet that nobody has pulled out yet. Today, they are being used as a diversion. That is the order. Take the first line of Confederate rifle pits at the base of Missionary Ridge. Make noise, draw attention. Give General Sherman time to do the real work up on the northern end of the ridge. The Army of the Cumberland is the bait. They are not the main effort. They are not the hammer. The order is clear as creek water. Take the first line of pits. Stop. Hold your position. Wait. The man who gave that order is standing on Orchard Knob, a small knuckle of a hill rising out of the valley floor like a clenched fist. He is wrapped in his officer's coat, chewing a cigar down to the band, watching the ridge through field glasses. His name is Ulysses S. Grant. He is the commanding general of all Union forces in the military division of the Mississippi. He has just saved this army from starvation by reopening the supply line, the thing the soldiers call the cracker line. He is brilliant, he is relentless, and right now, in this valley, on this morning, he does not fully trust the Army of the Cumberland to do anything more complicated than march in a straight line and make a lot of noise. The man he put in command of them 1 month ago is standing somewhere in that valley with 23,000 soldiers, a Virginian who chose the Union flag over his own blood and his own family, a massive, deliberate, granite-faced soldier whose men call him Pap. His name is George Henry Thomas, and the plan Grant has designed for this battle keeps Thomas on the shortest leash Grant has ever put on a subordinate. What happens in the next 3 hours will shatter that plan completely. It will make Grant angrier than he has been at any point in the war. It will force him to demand out loud, in front of his entire staff, who gave an unauthorized order. It will put careers at serious risk. And then it will deliver the most shocking, improbable, spontaneous victory in the entire history of the Civil War. To understand what happened on the slopes of Missionary Ridge, you have to understand what was happening inside the two men at the center of this story. George Thomas is not the kind of general history falls in love with. He doesn't deliver speeches that make grown men weep. He doesn't write florid letters about the cause and the glory and the sacred duty of the Republic. He is big, slow-spoken, and built like a fireplace. His staff officers say he moves through a headquarters the way a river moves through a canyon, steady, heavy, and impossible to redirect once he has chosen his course. He makes decisions the way a mason lays bricks, one at a time, each one fitted and checked before the next one goes down. He does not move until he is ready, and when he moves, he does not stop for anything except the complete destruction of whatever is standing in front of him. He is from Southampton County, Virginia. This fact has followed him through the war like a ghost. When secession came, his family expected him to ride south. His sisters turned his portrait to face the wall. They removed his name from the family Bible. They never spoke of him again for the rest of their lives. Thomas chose the Union over Virginia, over his sisters, over everything that his class and his culture said a Virginia gentleman was obligated to do. That choice stripped him of his past and handed him nothing but his uniform and his conscience. And he made it without hesitation and without ever publicly discussing it again. In Washington, the politicians never fully trusted him because of where he was born. In the officer corps, his rivals whispered that he was too slow, too careful, too unwilling to take the kind of aggressive risk that wins wars in a single bold stroke. These critics would all eventually discover they were completely wrong. But in November of 1863, on the morning of the battle for Chattanooga, the whispers are still loud enough to shape the plan Grant has built. Grant has his own logic. He does not dislike Thomas personally. The tension between them is something colder than personal dislike. It is professional friction. They are two entirely different instruments, and when you strike them against each other, you don't get harmony. You get sparks. Grant is pure forward momentum, dressed in a muddy coat. He thinks fast, decides faster, and expects his orders to be executed at the same velocity. He believes the only way to win a war is to lean into the enemy constantly, press them at every point, deny them rest, deny them time, deny them the ability to breathe and think and regroup. He does not believe in the word ready. He believes in the word now. He has built his entire reputation on going when other generals were still preparing, on hitting when other generals were still hesitating, on staying in the fight when the conventional wisdom said fall back and lick your wounds. Thomas moves at a completely different speed. He thinks before he acts, which sounds obvious, but in the Civil War command culture, thinking too long before you acted could get you fired. He checks his supply lines. He walks the ground himself. He cross-examines his engineers. He reads the maps until the maps can't tell him anything new. He only gives the order to advance when the logistics are locked, the flanks are covered, the ammunition is distributed, and every division commander knows exactly what they are being asked to do and exactly why. This is not timidity. This is the hard-won lesson of a professional soldier who watched William Rosecrans ignore his logistics at Chickamauga and pay for it with 16,000 men. Thomas watched that massacre happen from a ridge. He held his ground while half the Union Army ran. He drew the lesson with a cold, clear eye. You do not rush. You do not improvise your supply line. You do not move until the preparation is real, not just optimistic. Optimism kills soldiers. Preparation wins battles. These two philosophies are now sitting on the same battlefield, inside the same command structure, and the plan Grant has written makes the tension impossible to ignore. Grant's design for Chattanooga is clean on paper. Sherman takes the northern end of Missionary Ridge with the Army of the Tennessee. Hooker attacks Lookout Mountain at the southern end. Thomas makes a demonstration in the center. The pincer closes. Bragg is forced off the high ground. The siege is broken. Sherman is the main effort. Sherman is the star. Thomas is the distraction. There is a specific reason Grant gives Sherman the decisive role instead of Thomas. Sherman's men are the Army of the Tennessee. They are Grant's army from Shiloh and Vicksburg and a dozen hard fights in between. Grant has been in the foxhole with those men. He knows their habits and their limits and their particular brand of stubbornness. He knows what they will do when the situation goes wrong because he has watched them do it. The Army of the Cumberland is different. They are the Army of Chickamauga. They have been living inside a besieged city for 6 weeks, eating short rations and staring up at the Confederates on the ridgeline. Grant looks at them and sees a question mark. He cannot afford a question mark in his main effort. He will not say this out loud in front of Thomas, but the plan says it clearly enough. Thomas knows it. His corps commanders know it. Every soldier in the Army of the Cumberland who can read a map and count the divisions assigned to each objective knows it. And this knowledge does not sit quietly. It burns. The men of Chickamauga have been carrying that defeat like a stone in their chest since September. They retreated. They got surrounded. They got put on half rations in their own city. Every morning they wake up in Chattanooga and look east and see Missionary Ridge and the Confederate flags snapping in the cold wind above it, and they feel the weight of what happened to them pressing down on their shoulders. They are not broken. The fact that they held it all at Chickamauga, that Thomas held the center while the rest of the army dissolved around him, proves they are not broken. But the narrative in Washington and in Grant's headquarters has already been written. The Army of the Cumberland are the ones who got beaten. They are the diversion. Let Grant's real soldiers do the heavy lifting. The orders Thomas receives for November 25th are explicit. His 4 divisions, Wood, Sheridan, Baird, and Johnson, will advance from Orchard Knob at a signal. 6 guns fired in rapid succession. They will move across the valley floor, cover roughly half a mile of open ground, and seize the first line of Confederate rifle pits dug at the base of Missionary Ridge. Once they have the rifle pits, they will halt and hold their position. They will wait for further orders. They will not go further. They will not improvise. They are the demonstration, not the assault. Thomas takes this order and examines it with the same cold engineering eye he applies to everything. He does not like what he sees. The rifle pits at the base of Missionary Ridge present a specific, lethal problem that the order as written does not acknowledge. When his men take those pits, they will be standing at the very foot of a 500-foot cliff packed with Confederate rifles and artillery. The Confederate defenders on the crest will have an almost perfect firing angle down onto the exposed Union soldiers in the pits. The men will be bunched together at the base, in plain view, with nowhere to go. Holding the rifle pits means standing in a killing ground and waiting. Thomas communicates his concerns through his staff. The concerns are noted. The order stands. There is something else. For weeks, while his army starved and waited, Thomas's engineers and scouts had been studying the Confederate defensive layout on Missionary Ridge, and they had found something. The Confederate position, despite its fearsome appearance from the valley floor, has a structural flaw buried inside it. Bragg's defensive line on the crest of the ridge was built in the wrong place. His engineers placed the main works at the physical top of the ridge, right at the crest. This looks correct to the eye. You put your defenses at the high point. But there is a problem with this geometry. Because of the steepness of the slope and the angle of the ridge, the Confederate guns and riflemen at the very crest cannot depress their weapons far enough to fire straight down at the base of the ridge. There is a dead zone, a cone of relative safety that extends up the lower portion of the slope where Confederate fire cannot reach at a useful angle. The base of the ridge is paradoxically more exposed than the mid-slope. Thomas knows this. His division commanders know this. The men in the ranks do not know it in precise tactical language, but they are about to discover it in the most visceral possible way. At 3:30 in the afternoon, Grant gives the signal. 6 cannon shots echo across the valley. The guns of Orchard Knob speak one after another, and the sound rolls out across the frozen fields like the tolling of a bell. Thomas's 4 divisions rise up out of the valley. The flags come up, the battle lines dress, and then 23,000 men begin to move across the open ground toward the base of Missionary Ridge. The Confederate skirmishers in the rifle pits see them coming and open fire. The range closes. The Union line absorbs the fire and keeps moving. Faster now. The soldiers are running. The rebel yells answer. The Union cheer rises from 20,000 throats. Not a cheer of joy, a cheer of anger. A cheer with 2 months of humiliation and starvation packed into it. They hit the rifle pits. The Confederate skirmishers break and run. They scramble up the slope. The first line of pits falls in minutes. It is almost shockingly fast. The Union soldiers drop into the captured rifle pits. They are breathing hard. They look around. They look back across the valley at Orchard Knob. They look up to their left and right, where they expect to see Sherman's men rolling up the northern end of the ridge. Sherman is nowhere in sight. The sounds from the north end of the ridge are muffled and confused. Then the Confederate fire from the crest above them begins. Artillery shells are exploding in the valley behind them and to their sides. Confederate musket fire is sweeping down the slope. Men are being hit in the rifle pits. They are crowded together. They have no room to maneuver. The pits that were meant to shelter them are now crowded traps. Men are getting shot, sitting in a ditch waiting for orders that are not coming. General Thomas Wood, commanding one of Thomas's divisions, looks at the situation with a commander's clarity. The men cannot stay in the pits. To stay in the pits is to die in the pits. Holding the first line under this fire is the most dangerous order he has ever been given. The officers look at each other. They look up the slope. They look at the men being hit around them. General Philip Sheridan, commanding another division, uncorks his whiskey flask, raises it toward the Confederate gunners on the crest above, and shouts something that the officers near him can barely hear over the noise. Then he points his sword up the slope. General Thomas Wood is doing the same thing. The men need no further instruction. They know exactly what the sword is pointing at. They go up. It is not an ordered assault. There is no signal. There is no bugle call. There is no coordinated plan. What happens next is one of the most extraordinary things in the history of American warfare. 23,000 soldiers spontaneously, simultaneously, without a single order being issued from the commanding general, begin to climb Missionary Ridge. They are not walking up. They are clawing and scrambling on all fours up a 500-foot slope of loose rock and frozen grass at a 45-degree angle. They are grabbing tree roots and exposed limestone to haul themselves upward. They are climbing into the face of Confederate rifle fire and artillery. They are the army Grant assigned as a diversion, and they have decided entirely on their own that the diversion is not enough. Back on Orchard Knob, Grant sees it happen. He is watching through field glasses, and for a moment, he genuinely cannot process what he is seeing. The Army of the Cumberland was supposed to be in the rifle pits. They are supposed to be holding the first line. They are not in the rifle pits. They are climbing the ridge. They are going straight up the face of Missionary Ridge, a frontal assault up a fortified slope that no competent general in the 19th century would ever order, and they are doing it without being ordered. Grant turns to his staff. His jaw is tight. The cigar has stopped moving. He turns to General Thomas, who is standing nearby. His voice, normally flat and controlled, has an edge in it. Who ordered those men up the ridge? Thomas is watching the slope with the same field glasses. He doesn't answer immediately. He watches his men climbing. Then he turns to General Gordon Granger, the commander of the Reserve Corps, standing nearby. Who ordered those men up the ridge? Granger looks back with an expression that is somewhere between guilty and defiant. I don't know. I don't know, but it worked, someone says. And then there is nothing anyone can do but watch. The Confederate defenders on the crest of Missionary Ridge cannot believe what they are seeing. No rational enemy does this. No ordered military operation sends men straight up the face of a fortified cliff. The Confederate gunners at the top try to depress their artillery and find exactly the problem Thomas's engineers predicted. The guns won't angle far enough. They are shooting over the heads of the men climbing toward them. They switch to rolling cannonballs down the slope. They throw rocks. They fire pistols over the edge. The logic of the fortification is collapsing in real time because the fortification was built for an enemy that fought by the rules, and the Army of the Cumberland has decided that today the rules do not apply to them. The men reach the mid-slope. They are gasping. Their hands are bleeding from the rocks. Their uniforms are torn on the thorns and the limestone edges. They have abandoned their neat battle formations completely. They are climbing in clusters, in pairs, in solo rushes from rock to tree to depression in the ground. Officers are not leading them. They are barely keeping up with them. The color bearers are the real leaders now. Each regiment has a man carrying the national flag and the regimental flag, and every man in the regiment is following those flags up the slope, because if the colors are moving forward, then you move forward because you do not let your regiment's flag go up a ridge without you. The Confederates on the crest are beginning to crack. They can see the flags coming. They can see the sheer mass of men flowing up the slope toward them. The Confederate line on Missionary Ridge is in the same structural trouble that Longstreet warned Lee about at Gettysburg. It has been built at the wrong place on the wrong ground for the wrong reason. Bragg's engineers put the defenses at the military crest, the very top of the ridge, which means that defenders cannot see the slope below them properly. The Union soldiers climbing that slope enter a fold in the ground maybe 150 feet below the crest and effectively disappear from view for a critical 60 seconds. When they emerge from that fold, they are not a distant threat anymore. They are right there. They are 5 yards away. The psychology of defense collapses instantly. Men who have been shooting down a slope for 20 minutes and watching the enemy keep coming anyway, surviving everything, still climbing, are not in a stable mental condition when that enemy suddenly appears at arm's length. The Confederate line breaks, not in one place, in a dozen places simultaneously. Regiments peel away from their positions. The men who were laughing at the starved Union garrison in Chattanooga 6 weeks ago are now running. General Braxton Bragg, watching from his headquarters on the ridge, cannot comprehend what he is seeing. He says it to the officers around him that no troops in the world could take this ridge by direct assault. He is watching it be taken. He is watching his carefully prepared position, the position that was supposed to hold until winter shut the campaign down, being overrun by men climbing with their bare hands. Philip Sheridan reaches the crest of Missionary Ridge. He stands up on the Confederate earthworks at the top of a 500-foot ridge with his sword in one hand and his whiskey flask in the other. He shouts something about his mother-in-law that nobody writes down accurately. Men pour over the crest around him. Confederate guns are captured. Confederate flags are torn down. The Army of the Cumberland plants their own colors on the top of Missionary Ridge, and for one suspended, extraordinary moment, the men who were the diversion, the sideshow, the question mark that Grant didn't trust, are standing at the top of the highest point on the battlefield, looking down at the Confederate army running away from them. Grant watches this from Orchard Knob. His anger is real. An unauthorized advance of this scale could have ended in a massacre. If the Confederate line had held, 23,000 men clustered on the face of that slope with no organized formation, no coherent plan, and no avenue of retreat would have been annihilated. Grant knows this. He is not wrong to be angry. The order was given for a reason. You don't throw an entire army up a cliff without a plan because you are impatient with waiting in a rifle pit. Military discipline exists precisely to prevent this kind of spontaneous decision-making from producing catastrophe. But the catastrophe did not happen. The line did not hold. The Confederate Army is streaming north in a route that Bragg will spend the rest of the war trying to explain to Jefferson Davis. The Army of the Cumberland is standing on the ridge. Grant turns to Thomas. Thomas has not moved. He is still watching through his field glasses, steady, heavy, expressionless as limestone. Grant's question about who ordered those men up the ridge hangs in the cold Tennessee air. Thomas does not flinch. He does not apologize. He does not manufacture an explanation. He looks at the crest of Missionary Ridge, at his men and his flags up there against the late afternoon sky, and whatever he says in that moment is not entered into the official record with any precision, because the battle is still going on, and there are more important things to write down than the exact words of a conversation between two generals in the aftermath of a miracle. What the record does show is that Grant does not relieve Thomas. He does not bring charges. He does not even formally reprimand him, because you cannot reprimand a man for winning. You cannot write up a report that says the Army of the Cumberland violated their orders, and in doing so captured the most formidable defensive position in the Western Theater, ended the siege of Chattanooga, and sent Braxton Bragg's army running into Georgia. The violation and the victory are the same action. You cannot separate them. This is the specific and profound tension at the heart of this story. Grant's order was dangerous, but not in the way the history books usually frame it. The order to take the rifle pits and stop was dangerous because it put 23,000 men in the most exposed possible position on the battlefield, trapped at the base of a fortified ridge, in plain view, under plunging fire, with nowhere to go. Thomas had told his engineers and his staff that this was the consequence of the plan. Grant's order created a situation where compliance and survival were in direct conflict. The most dangerous thing Thomas's men could have done was exactly what they were told to do, which was stay in the pits. The soldiers understood this before the officers did. The men in the rifle pits at the base of Missionary Ridge were not reckless. They were not undisciplined. They made the most rational calculation available to them. They were being shot at from above. They could not retreat, because retreating across 500 yards of open valley under artillery fire is its own kind of death sentence. They could not stay because staying meant dying in a ditch, waiting for orders. The only direction that offered any kind of logical escape from their situation was up. The mountain was the only cover available. The enemy was at the top of the mountain. These facts aligned in the minds of 23,000 soldiers at exactly the same moment and produced the same conclusion. Go up. The legend of the charge up Missionary Ridge gets told two ways. The first version is pure romance. The Army of the Cumberland, humiliated at Chickamauga, spontaneously redeemed themselves in a moment of pure American fighting spirit. They went up because they were tired of being looked down on. They climbed the unclimbable because the men of the Army of the Cumberland simply would not accept defeat. This version is popular, and it is not entirely wrong. The shame of Chickamauga was real. The desire to put that shame behind them was real. When the color bearers started moving up the slope and the men followed the flags, there was something in that motion that was about more than tactics. But the second version is more important. The second version is about what Thomas's order actually meant and what it was truly based on. Thomas had spent weeks studying that ridge. His engineers had mapped the dead zones in the Confederate field of fire. His scouts had identified the structural weakness in Bragg's defensive layout. The conventional reading of what happened on November 25th is that Thomas's men charged without orders and got lucky. The less conventional, more uncomfortable reading is that Thomas had not ordered the charge formally because Grant's plan did not authorize it, but Thomas had positioned his men, informed his division commanders, and prepared his army in a way that made the charge not only possible, but tactically rational the moment the situation on the ground demanded it. Thomas did not give the order, but he had done everything except give the order. He had given his men a map of the ridge that they carried in their heads when the moment came. Grant's anger at Orchard Knob is the anger of a commanding general whose plan was discarded. It is legitimate anger, but it is also the anger of a man who is now watching the consequences of his own plan's fundamental flaw being solved by the army he had written off as the distraction. Grant had not trusted the Army of the Cumberland with the main effort because he was not sure they had recovered from Chickamauga. They were the question mark. What happened on November 25th answered the question. The Army of the Cumberland was not a question mark. They were the answer. They were the men who took the ridge that was not supposed to be taken by direct assault on the day when the general assigned to do the actual work, Sherman, failed to break through on the northern end. Sherman never gets this part of the story. Sherman's attack on the northern end of the ridge stalled completely on November 25th. He did not break through. The Confederate right held. Grant's main effort, his primary plan, his trusted force, ran into a Confederate position at Tunnel Hill and could not move it. While Sherman was stalled, while the plan Grant built was sitting motionless, the army he had assigned as background noise climbed a 500-foot cliff with their bare hands and won the battle. There is a lesson in this that goes beyond Chattanooga. There is a lesson about what it costs to assign an army of experienced soldiers to a secondary role because of what they did 2 months ago, instead of what they are capable of doing today. There is a lesson about the specific kind of danger that comes from an order that puts men in an impossible position and then tells them to stay in it. The most dangerous order Grant gave at Chattanooga was not a suicidal frontal assault. He never ordered one. The most dangerous order was the order to take the rifle pits and stop, because stopping in those pits was the thing most likely to get 23,000 men killed. Thomas understood this. His men understood this. When they chose to climb instead of stay, they were not disobeying the spirit of their mission. They were finding the only available way to survive it and complete it simultaneously. George Henry Thomas is buried at West Point. He has no monument in the Confederate capital. He has no romantic mythology attached to his name the way Grant does or Sherman does. He is not the subject of the famous paintings or the famous speeches. He is the general who stood on a ridge at Chickamauga while the army dissolved and didn't move, and held the line and earned the title The Rock, and then got assigned to a sideshow role at Chattanooga by a commanding general who wasn't sure he could be trusted. He took that role. He prepared for it. He positioned his men. And when the moment came, he let them climb. He never charged up Missionary Ridge himself. He watched it from the valley. He watched his men do in 40 minutes what the Confederate engineers had designed a mountain to prevent forever. He stood on Orchard Knob next to the commanding general, who wanted to know who gave the order. He gave the only answer that mattered. He didn't have to say it. The flags on the crest of Missionary Ridge said it for him. The Army of the Cumberland was not the diversion. They were the decision. Grant learned something on November 25, 1863, that he would carry forward through the wilderness and Spotsylvania and Cold Harbor and Petersburg. He learned that armies do not perform according to the assumptions of the commanders who built the plan. They perform according to the reality of the ground and the will of the men on it. He learned that a commanding general who assigns his best tools to a secondary role because of a defeat that happened 6 weeks ago is not planning. He is managing his own fear of being wrong. Grant was wrong about Thomas's men. He admitted it in the way that Grant always admitted things, not with words, but with actions. He never again assigned the Army of the Cumberland to a supporting role when the decisive blow needed to be struck. Thomas went on to command entire theater campaigns. He went on to Nashville in 1864, where Grant nearly fired him for being too slow to attack, and then Thomas attacked and destroyed the Confederate Army of Tennessee so completely and so efficiently that it never reorganized as a fighting force again. That is the Thomas pattern. He takes time, he prepares, he does not move until he is ready, and then when he moves, the thing he is aimed at stops existing. At Chattanooga, in the dying light of a November afternoon, the most dangerous order Grant gave at Chattanooga was followed, disobeyed, and completed all at the same time. The men took the rifle pits. They did not stop. They climbed the mountain instead. They won the battle that Sherman was supposed to win. They ended the siege that was supposed to require a perfect pincer movement to break. And standing at the base of it all, watching through his field glasses with the flat, steady gaze of a man who prepared for this without being able to say so, was a Virginian who chose the Union over his family, over his home state, over everything, and then spent the rest of the war waiting for the army and the country and the history books to figure out exactly what kind of soldier they had. The ridge is still there. You can drive out to Chattanooga and park at the base and look up. It is still 500 feet of rock and scrub pine. It still looks unclimbable. Stand there on a cold November day and try to imagine 23,000 starving men going up the face of it in the afternoon light with their bare hands and their battle flags and the shame of Chickamauga sitting in their chests like a stone they had decided to leave at the top. The ridge is still there. The flags are long gone. But the men who put them there proved something on that slope that no order and no plan and no commanding general could take credit for, and no history book has ever fully explained. They proved that the most dangerous thing in the American Civil War was not the order that sent men forward. It was the order that told them to stop when stopping would get them killed. And the general who understood that, who prepared his men for the moment when the order and the ground would come into direct and deadly conflict, and who trusted them to solve the problem themselves, that general was not standing on the crest of Missionary Ridge with a whiskey flask and a sword. He was standing in the valley, watching the same way he always stood, steady as the rock they named him after, waiting for the flags to appear at the top of something everyone else said could not be climbed.